team sports growing up kind of really helped me with my, social skills, obviously making friends, building connections, building relationships. My teammates, not only in baseball but also in swimming, I call them not only my teammates but my brothers. So that definitely helped me growing up with going through, because I did go through a couple things at home, a couple challenges. Philadelphia isn't exactly the nicest area, and the area that I grew up was nice, but I definitely had my challenges financially, and kind of having sports as my release, away from school, away from the stresses at home, and in the neighborhood and stuff like that. It really helped me as a young boy, and now as a young man, in all aspects of my life. So sports is still a huge aspect of my life, obviously now, and as a coach. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it weren't for sports and that camaraderie, just understanding when it's time to pass the ball, when it's time to shoot, when it's time to, go on the plate. Sometimes in baseball you got to bunt. Although you don't want to bunt, you got to do it for the better of the team. And I think understanding that at a young age is so important to everything that we all do
100%.
So you're the youngest head coach in NAIA history, right?
Yes.
I mean, that is a huge feat, not just in swimming, but in any sport in NAIA history. I mean, talk to us about that. How old are you, first off, when you became an NAIA coach?
So I was 23 at the time that I accepted the offer. I just turned 24 early February this month. So it was definitely a huge honor. Kind of the opportunity kind of just fell into my lap, so to speak. We had great success with the Mater Lakes team this year. They're in swimming, so that kind of put me on the radar at the college level. But it's definitely a huge honor. I just want to give a huge shout out to President Armstrong and Athletic Director Reichel for really giving me this opportunity. And it's definitely, I mean, when you put it like that, Mayor Sid, it's kind of just like, wow, like I'm the youngest ever. So obviously I'm going to be able to relate to the college kids, because there's not going to be that much of an age difference. But I'm definitely going to hope that they see that my passion shines through, my youth, and obviously my competitiveness. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do over at St. Thomas.
Man, that's not only incredible, but I know it's not easy. Look, I went through it here in the town of Miami Lakes. I was the youngest mayor in town history. I was about 32 years old when I got elected, and people are like, man, there's no way this guy can do the job, right? So I'm sure you deal with that. You show up at meets and people look at you and they're like, hey, he's one of the athletes. He's not the coach.
Exactly.
It happens to me all the time. There are times that I go places and people are like, hey, where's the mayor? But I know it's challenging, but kudos to you for fighting through that. Those are the being so young, and I mean that's just, it's blown me away. So congratulations.
Appreciate that.
On that. But talk on being a successful athlete, a successful coach. I mean, what are the ingredients that folks need to understand to take it to the levels that you've taken it?
So for me, what really has kind of been my main focus in life has been the mental approach. A lot of people don't realize the importance of the mental aspect of your life, from just going through adversity and hardships, both physical and mental, to dealing with, in sports, right? You're not always going to feel 100% at practice. You're not always going to feel 100% when you roll out of bed in the morning. So it's kind of having that mental approach of, well, you know what, like, I may not be at my best today, but I'm going to give it my best effort, right? So I really have attributed a lot of my successes, being the youngest coach at the NEIA level, the successes I'm seeing at the high school and club level. I really focus on the mental aspect, not only with myself, but with my athletes. So I definitely think that my mental approach has been one of the biggest contributing factors to my success so far.
You mentioned something, adversity. A lot of people run away from adversity.
Yes.
I love embracing adversity, specifically with the folks around you. When things are going well, everybody wants to be your friend, everybody loves life. But when adversity hits, you get to see people's souls, right? You get to see what they're really all about. So you mentioning that, especially at a young age, and being a coach and teaching your kids to really embrace that is so important. But the mental aspect of it, and I think that's why it's led to a nonprofit that you had. And I think that's so important, that in society people understand that it's not just having a job, making money, being a coach, but having a greater impact on society. And you started something called the Mind Power Foundation.
That's right.
Talk to us about that.
So in my experience, this is actually going to be my 6th year coaching. It's hard to believe that the numbers are starting to add up a little bit, but in all my years of coaching, all the hundreds of athletes that I've worked with at the age group level, from 8 years old, 6 years old, all the way into middle school, high school, and at the collegiate level, one thing I've seen has been consistent throughout all levels, and that's the lack of mental support for high school student athletes, for age group student athletes, for collegiate student athletes. Just having them approach me as a coach with questions that I was not exactly, you know, ever well versed in or trained in, or nobody really talked to me about. You know, things like, well, hey, you know, coach, I just had a really bad fight at home. You know, I'm not really feeling 100%. Or hey, coach, you know, I'm going through some things with my family. I'm going through some things with my significant other. And that's really causing my academic as well as my athletic performances to decline. So I saw that, and you know, as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old, you know, they're able to relate to me on a more personal level because of that age. You know, it's not so much of an age difference. So I took that, and obviously, you know, being in the position that I was as a coach, I was able to provide some advice and some insight and some guidance that really helped out dozens of athletes. And you know, years later now, I'm getting messages, you know, through Instagram, through text messages, hey coach, that one conversation you had with me after that practice, that one conversation you had with me after that swim meet really helped me a lot. And you know, I just had a girl reach out to me in December talking about how I sat her down after a really tough day at practice, and she really kind of just opened up to me, and it was the most beautiful thing, and this has happened many times, which has led to the Mind Power Foundation. And she told me that, hey coach, like, if you didn't sit me down at that moment and talk to me, I would have continued going into a downward mental spiral, and I don't think I would be in college right now. She's currently at the University of Florida. She's doing great. She's very successful. I think she's a business major. And kind of having her talk to me like that really, you know, humbles me, and also put things in perspective of just how important each and every single one of us are. In our lifetimes, we're going to influence at a minimum of 10,000 people. You're going to directly impact or influence throughout your entire life 10,000 people, and you don't even know, right? Just from your presence, just from conversations, just from interactions. So the Mind Power Foundation was founded on the principle of we can all do better for each other, right? So, you know, it's been around since 2019 is when we got the business licensing, you know, became a federal 501c3, the whole nine. And since then, we've run multiple events, and every single time, you know, just seeing those kids, seeing their eyes light up, seeing kind of how powerful and how impactful that is. And it's not like, you know, we are the best or we are, you know, the most well-educated in mental health. We just care, right? And we're trying to build a networking platform to bring mental health professionals, sports psychologists into the mix, give these high school students, give these college student athletes, give these age group athletes resources and opportunities for them to talk about things that we are just now starting to talk about, which is the mental health stigma, not only in the general public, but in athletics. So.
Yeah, and that's what we got to tell folks. You know, it's okay to have anxiety. It's okay to feel a little different, but you got to talk about it.
You do.
We've seen it during the pandemic, how we only talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, but there's a crisis in our country, and that's the mental health crisis. Here in the town of Miami Lakes, we started something called Mental Health Thursdays, where we would bring in clinicians to talk to folks, and the amount of people that would reach out and say, hey, I just want to have a conversation. Because we're a society that, you know, you open up Instagram, what do you see? You know, folks working out, eating well, this and that, but they don't work on their mental health. We work on every other aspect of our lives, but we don't work on our mental health. So hearing what you're doing at Mind Power is so important, because in the Hispanic community, specifically in our area of the county, you hit it on the head, there's a stigma. It's almost taboo, where folks don't want to talk about mental health, but people like you, young folks, are breaking through that mold, because I've seen it. I mean, all you gotta do is open up Facebook or Twitter, and you see the amount of folks, sometimes we think, hey, they're acting out, but the reality is they're reaching out for help, and they just want somebody to talk to. So, especially on the student athlete side, I think you're seeing more and more athletes. NBA players recently came out and said, hey, you know, it's okay to talk about this, my anxiety, my depression, but I think we have to be more open as a society. So, but what was the inspiration, not only as an athlete, what inspired you to kind of break that stigma? Because it's not easy to talk about it at such a young age. And when we started talking about it here in the town, people were like, you know, we really appreciate it. And you know, and now we even have a task force, which, hearing what you're doing, you're going to get invited to the next task force meeting. It's a mental health task force meeting,
awesome.
And I want you to be a part of that. But what inspired you to break through that stigma?
So I definitely want to bring up my own personal struggles in adversity, because your story defines you in life, right? We've talked a lot about adversity so far on the podcast today, but for me, growing up, I was the kid, you know, I was a great baseball player, I was a great swimmer, I was social, I was confident, I was the jock at high school, right, the stereotypical jock. And when you looked at me, you know, from the surface level, you saw a confident guy, charismatic person, very outgoing. What you didn't see is the invisible battles that I was going through up here, right? Not just the anxiety, but the depression that I was going through because of the violence and what I was seeing not only domestically at my house, but just around me in the community, seeing my friends get locked up at 16, 17, 18 years old for drug charges and being put away for 20 years. You know, some of them it's mind-boggling to me, having friends that die in car accidents because of drug drivers, right? So I went through all that as a young student athlete, and I struggled, but you would have never saw that. So in college is when all that repression, all that sweeping under the rug, all these issues mentally that I was sweeping under the rug, it finally came into light, right? And I was very lucky to have the co-founder of the Mind Power Foundation, his name is Chandler Gall. Him and I created a bond and a relationship. I mean, he's literally my brother. You know, and that's kind of one of the beauties of college, is meeting these individuals who are going to be lifelong friends. So it's funny that this question was asked, because I remember the specific moment where Mind Power, or the inception of Mind Power was, and it was one of those 2 a.m. conversations, as Mayor said, that I'm sure you've had with your friends, you know, late night, you know, you get into deeper conversations. And I'm telling them, like, Chandler, like, you are a D1 level athlete, man. You know, why aren't you playing here at Barry? Why aren't you playing basketball? Why aren't you playing golf? Why aren't you playing soccer? You know, and for him, he kind of just opened up and talked about his struggles. And I'm like, well, hey, and he's from Indiana. I'm from Philadelphia. You know, and some stories that we've heard from other people is like, this is everywhere. We're talking about pandemics, we're talking about COVID, but let's talk about the mental health pandemic. Let's talk about the suicide rates, how they've gone up during the pandemic. Let's talk about my high school student athletes that are going through all these struggles, going through seasons that are being canceled and all that. So, you know, not to go too far off track, but the inception of Mind Power was kind of just two young men, two college seniors that kind of sat down at 2 a.m. and were like, you know what, more needs to be done. You know, what can we do to help out the next generation? So we just went to the Barry University Library and we clocked in 4 to 6 hours a day for the next 3 months, learning about business licensing, how to start a nonprofit. We did it all by ourselves, just him and I and a couple others, Maria Wilson and Samantha Britz, who are all on the board currently. And it's just been humbling because, like you said in the beginning, I'm young, right? So when you see me, like, oh, he's a student, you know, he's a coach, he's a St. Thomas University head coach. I thought he was an athlete, right? But my youth, I use that to my advantage because I get it. I just went through it. So with Mind Power, I want you guys to see the mistakes that I made, the repression that I did, my entire life, not talking about it, powering through it, just saying that, hey, you know, I'm fine, when in reality I wasn't. I needed somebody to talk to. I needed a shoulder to lean on. I needed a community. And that's what we envision Mind Power to be, and that's what we are very humbled to say it is becoming.
You know, do you remember Ricky Williams? Played
Yes.
for the Dolphins.
Yes.
So Ricky Williams, I don't know if you guys remember that, he would wear his helmet sometimes when he would do interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And one time he disappeared, and people were just focused on the sports side, saying, hey, why is he doing that? Why doesn't he show up? But they didn't understand the mental health side and what he was going through, right? People weren't really accepting of that.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you consider to be the most inhibiting mental barrier for many athletes, like somebody like what Ricky Williams went through, and we're seeing what more and more athletes are coming out to, but what's that barrier that you're seeing?
So for me, I think the biggest barrier for everybody is what they build inside their minds, which you brought up as a mental barrier. And we all have it, right? Whether it's self-doubt, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's just you're seeing your body image or your self-image, because in athletics, obviously physical conditioning, how you look is very important, right? Coaches saying, hey man, you look like you gained a couple pounds in the off season. Okay, that affects an athlete. So as a coach, you really have to watch. But at the end of the day, I think one of the main obstacles that all athletes face is themselves. Really, it's nobody else. It's not their coaches. It's not their friends. Sure, the environment plays a factor, but that person that you look at in the mirror, that's the person that stops you. And that's what I coach. That's what I tell all my athletes. You can put a label on it. You could say it's anxiety. You could say it's self-esteem issues. You could say it's a variety of things. But at the end of the day, it's yourself. It's you against you. And everybody's cliche. Everybody knows this, right? The person that looks back at you in the mirror could be your best friend or your worst enemy. You decide that, right? And it's a lot easier said than done to kind of make that switch in your brain of kind of, hey, you know, instead of looking at my love handles, instead of looking at, well, hey, I don't have my six-pack, or I'm not looking, or I'm not in the best shape ever, it's, well, you know what? What can I do to start working towards getting to where I want to be? Getting into that mental approach rather than that downward negative mental spiral that a lot of people tend to kind of gravitate towards when things get tough.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed about this generation of Americans, your generation of Americans, when I was a senior in high school in 2002, I got my first cell phone, right? It wasn't a smartphone. Smartphones didn't exist back then. We had the internet, but it wasn't to what it is today. I had MySpace. That was the first social media platform. But what I'm noticing, and my oldest son turns 13 this year, is that your generation is connected 24/7. And while that is incredibly powerful, if used for good, but also I see the mentality change, because you're being constantly shown on social media, and folks, hey, why can't I have this? Look at this person. Everybody, a lot of the stuff is fake, right? You know, people post just the good, but I think that's where my question to you would be, you know, what would you change about this generation's mentality? Where I every time I talk to young people, I'm like, listen, you're one of the first generations of Americans that'll be judged by your Google search, not your resume. So everything you do today, in high school, whatever, it's not just in your head, but it'll be engraved somewhere on social media forever. So when you're 30-something years old, you want to be mayor, you want to run for mayor, there are people that are going to be trying to find every single thing about you, but you're going to be giving it to them and probably use it. So what would you change about today's generation and their mentality? Because I'll be very honest with you, I get concerned sometimes with that impact that I didn't have to deal with. So everything, you know, if I behave bad, and look, full disclosure, I failed the grade. I failed the 6th grade. I got kicked out of school twice, but yeah, I know that stuff, but it's not on social media 24/7. People weren't talking, you know, so talk to us about today's generation and their mentality.
So I love the question, first of all, Mayor Sid, because technology, while it has brought us together, in my opinion, we have never been further apart from each other. And I see it daily. You know, so for me, while I am young, I'm kind of weird. I'm in that transition stage where I was in high school and Snapchat just came out. You know, Instagram was founded in 2012 and all that stuff. I believe, I actually know Instagram was founded a little earlier, but regardless, in high school, I was just getting introduced to social media. So now what I see in terms of the mentality is that everybody's comparing themselves. And so first thing I tell a lot of my athletes is get, like, your Instagram, like, I haven't done this so much yet, but I'm going to start doing it now, especially after this conversation that we're having, is let me see what you're looking at on Instagram, right? Because on my Instagram, I'm seeing, you know, physical therapists showing me prehab exercises to prevent injuries in my athletes. I'm seeing mental health therapists that have great podcasts, that have great content such as this, and just there's just so much good content out there, but I feel like the younger generations are kind of focusing on the wrong things, the wrong priorities. Right, and that's something. The first thing that I will change in regards to technology is not limiting the access to it. It's showing the next generation how to use it better. Because for me, I'm using it, and I'm learning things on Instagram and you know, Facebook and stuff like that. There's great content. I'm learning how to cook on Facebook. You know, I'm learning how to do a bunch of stuff on social media. But for the next generation, more specifically the high school kids that I'm coaching, I'm seeing what they're looking at, and it's basura, for lack of a better term. You know, it's well, how is that going to benefit you in your life? Instead of scrolling on Instagram after you wake up, I tell my kids, stretch, right? Don't immediately roll out of bed and get on your phone, right? Take some time to focus on you, because like you said, 24/7, immersed in everything. You're worried so much about everybody else that you forget about you. And that's where mental health is really struggling, and how it's being highlighted even more so now is because you're so worried about what everybody else is doing. Focus on yourself, your goals, what you truly enjoy doing, right? You're feeling a little bit, you know, clogged in or a little bit, you know, isolated. Of course you are. It's the pandemic. Get outside. Get off your phone. Tan in your backyard. Get some outside exercise. Do some yoga, right? And you can learn yoga on Instagram and social media. There are yoga instructors on YouTube. Right? So, in my opinion, I think the first step for many of the youth to kind of change their mentality is reflect on how you're using your technology. Because technology is great if you utilize it properly.
No, you're absolutely right, and I really appreciate your mindset and what you're doing for the student athletes. I see the sky's the limit for you and everything you're doing, and especially at such a young age. What are your future career goals? Where do you see yourself, you know, 10 years from now? You know, I always love to ask that question, because when I was your age, I literally kind of talked about, you know, going into elected office and being the mayor one day, and 10 years later I ran for mayor and took the risk and won. So what are your future goals?
So it's actually funny that you bring it up because I do have aspirations of running for public office within the next 10 years. I definitely need to continue my involvement, obviously, in the community with my power and coaching and whatnot. But I definitely see a lot of things that I would like to help improve upon. A lot of things that we discussed today, I feel like I could bring a lot of light to, especially as a young man, just going through it and just being passionate, right? So for me, when I'm asked this question, it's if you told me at 18, 6 years ago, that I was going to be the youngest college swim coach, that I was going to be a state champion high school coach, that I was going to be doing the things that I'm doing now, I wouldn't have believed you. You know, so for me, I have this mentality of I like to have one eye on the future, but for right now I have an idea, which is public office. I love coaching, and I really have found my passion. And for anybody that's watching this podcast, you know, you're being told, especially in Hispanic households, that hey, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to be this, you got to make your family proud. But at the end of the day, and this kind of ties in directly to mental health, what are you passionate about? Do you like singing? Follow it. Do you like drawing, painting? Follow it. Sure, is it maybe not going to make the most money in the beginning? Maybe not. But fiscally, you shouldn't have a lot of concerns or a lot of priorities on how much money you're making. It should be, when you wake up, how do you feel? Are you ready to go into work? Like Mayor said, I don't know about you, but for me, I have morning swim practice at 6 a.m. I get out of bed at 5 a.m. with a smile on my face. You know, and there's that cliche saying that, you know, if you do what you love, it doesn't feel like you're working a day in your life. And for me, I'm very humbled to say that that is very true. And then you're going to hear it from me, and I imagine you, I'm sure you love to do what you do. And another benefit of that is, if you do what you love, you're going to be great at it. You know, because even if you're not the best in the industry yet, your passion is going to drive you. And that's going to be a positive influence on your life that's going to trickle down into all aspects. So.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of folks focus too much on the money. They're not happy. I mean, I've seen it happen here where, you know, sometimes one of our employees is like, you know what, I got a better offer in another city. They're going to offer me $5,000 more. And I'm like, you're happy here. You know what I mean? I go, you know, and I think it's that mindset that some folks got to change. But we got a couple minutes left. You got any questions for me, Caesar?
Of course. So, Mayor Sid, as a young 24-year-old up and coming, obviously, you know, getting some grassroots organizing in the community with my Power Foundation and a couple other ventures, what advice would you have for somebody like me that has aspirations in the future of running for public office?
Man, to be very honest with you, I think the future's now, right? I wouldn't wait. I would jump into the fray. I don't know where you live, but where do you live right now?
Currently, I'm in Miami Gardens.
Look, for example, the mayor of Miami Gardens is a really good friend of mine. We can make calls, we can set you guys up, but you know, join one of their citizen committees now. You know, if there's a seat open, run for it now. You're never gonna find the right opportunity, right? And that's something that I saw here. I never had everybody's support. Both times that I ran, the last time I ran unopposed, but the two elections that I had were highly contested. I had the entire establishment against me both times. So there was never a perfect time to do it, but I believed in myself, I believed in the vision, I believed in it. But to be very honest with you, I think you should get involved now. I think you should run for office now. And that's what I tell everybody, but too many times people are just looking around, they're like, you know what, it's not the right time. It's never the right time to do something. Be open to business, become a coach. You know, if you start thinking about all the little intricacies, it's never the right time to do something. And there's, I think, a paralysis of analysis, right? The more that you analyze it, the more you think, just do it. I mean, if you hit it on the head already. You already mentioned that you want to jump into public office. If I were in your shoes, just you do it now. I mean, there's no reason to wait 10 years. You have that thought process, and I think we need young folks to jump into the fray. So my advice to you, I would run for office now. I think you're ready. To be very honest with you. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You should definitely do it. So we have about 2 minutes left. I got to wrap it up. I appreciate the question. I appreciate more than anything you breaking barriers when it comes to mental health, especially at a young age, teaching your student athletes the importance of just not, hey, just get ready for a swim meet, eat well, you know, work out. No, you got to work on your mind too. So I really appreciate that. And thank you, Caesar, for participating, for joining us. I think today's podcast is going to inspire a lot of folks to have those tough conversations. And make sure you tune in next week, same time. On Wednesdays, we're going to be launching YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we'll see you then.